Let's start in Texas, Ben, because this is the probably most hyped call. Like, Paul Feinbaum said this was the most generationally talented quarterback, or in all ways, shapes, and forms since Tim Tebow. I would say he's at least the most talked about since Tim Tebow, and that was very true. And the wheels are already falling off here. He gets booed at home despite winning 27-10. We know how the Ohio State game went in week one. Feinbaum's off the bus completely. It's over, he said. Any sort of high-end outcome is done. Dan Wolken at Yahoo's writing that Texas may not even make the college football playoff. I mean, that's just a smattering. You just go online, and it's ugly. Where do you fall on the spectrum of, like, he was just hyped because of the family and the school and the pedigree and the NIL, to he actually was that good and he's just legitimately underperforming as an athlete?
Probably closer to the latter. I think that, like, you know, the comparison I always see get thrown around on social media and the memes is Bronny James. Like, I don't think this is a Bronny James NBA situation where, you know, you can make a pretty compelling case that he's only there because of his name. I mean, Arch Manning was the number one overall recruit in his class. Now, is he, you know, a 5-star prospect who was really a 4-star prospect, but got that boost because of who he is? Possibly, but like, he was a legitimately, like, highly touted player based on his own accolades. But I think the name helps as well. I mean, I think if anything's close, then you do kind of default to the name. Where I'm at with it, though, is like, he's just not a part of the discourse anymore. Like, to me, like, if you're still talking about Arch Manning, you're kind of chasing those clicks. You're forcing a conversation. Like, he is a name who people are going to talk about. I'm sure we're going to continue to write about him in some form or fashion, but like, to have any sort of discussion about him in the context of being a future number one overall pick or even a Heisman contender or anything like that, like, to me, that's not the conversation right now. That's not one that's rooted in reality. So, you know, a lot can change. They still have, like, any talk about them missing the playoff is kind of crazy because, as we saw a year ago, like, all you need to do is to win your conference. So we could very well be in a situation where, like, they blow out Oklahoma and we're back to Arch mania. But right now, to me, he's just not a part of the conversation.
How much do you think that other stuff did affect the preseason expectations, though? Like, the fact that he's a Manning, the fact that it's Texas, that's why I made the distinction that I did, like, versus Tebow or whatever. Like, I have no idea. I'm not going to pretend that I watched him in high school. I think I saw a few plays where he took snaps last season. I don't know what I'm talking about, right? But, like, I do see people saying, like, you know, the throwing mechanics, he's doing Matthew Stafford throws every single play out there for whatever reason. They're being a little bit opaque about the injury that he may or may not have. Like, I can see arguments on both sides, but I do come back to the fact that we were talking about this guy like he was more guaranteed, when at the same time I've watched guys like Cam Newton or Joe Burrow start with nothing or relatively little fanfare and wow us in the other direction. So I do have to, like, try to sort through why we let it get so out of control before we ever really watched him play against elite competition. And I think that there's definitely something valid to the people who are like, you know, shut up. He was just another quarterback, and you guys just made him out to be something and put millions of dollars in his pockets because of his family before we ever knew anything about his quality of play.
Oh, that part of it, I think, is primarily based on his name. Like, the stuff where Paul Feinbaum's saying he's already the best college quarterback since Tim Tebow. And then the other part of that, and I wrote about this a little bit for Awful Announcing, is then you started to get he became one of those names where it was like, you have to have an Arch Manning take. And so you have Paul Feinbaum getting out there being super pro Arch Manning the way that Skip Bayless was super pro Tim Tebow. And then you also have Jordan Rodgers coming in and you even saw it before the Ohio State game, kind of staking his claim to being anti-Arch Manning and treating Arch the way that Stephen A. Smith, I mean, he invoked this comparison exactly, treating Arch Manning the way that Stephen A. Smith treats the Dallas Cowboys. So he was one of those names who it was like, all right, if you're in the takes industry, you have to have a take on Arch Manning. And I think that part of it, I mean, even as highly as recruited as he was, like Quinn Ewers, the quarterback before him at Texas, was even more highly touted, and he never got any sort of this sort of buzz, preseason or otherwise, in terms of being a famous person in college football. So I think that aspect of it, and I was kind of looking at it as a whole, going back to when he was in high school. But if you just want to break this down to the last, 6 months since Quinn Ewers left Texas and it became clear that this was going to be Arch Manning's team, to me, all of that hype and all of that discussion is primarily rooted in what his last name is.
It's just fascinating, and the reason I think we're doing we pick topics for a segment like this is like that inevitably traces back to now why he's getting booed in week 3 and all these sorts of things. Like, it's an expectations game completely, and those are all created by the media. So it's this weird trickle down where it's inflated because of his name. Fans then have to kind of respond to that baseline of expectation. It's a weird spot for him to be in, and a weird spot for that program to be in, given that none of it was actually really based on the play on the field. I mean, there were people who study this stuff who would have told you he looked really, really great, but most guys have a lot more time to feel it out before we have any sort of big thoughts on them.